Amazing insights there from a really diverse panel. Now we're talking about investing in sustainability, inclusivity, and of course, diversity. Ali Madhavji from Blockchain Founders Fund will be speaking with Andrew Tang from Draper Goren, Matthew Friedel from Milwaukee Venture Partners, Jesse Draper from Halogen Ventures, Neha Mehta from FemTech Partners, and Kendra Ragatz from Acrew Capital. Really excited for the conversation. Enjoy.
All right, well, welcome to our panel at LA Blockchain Summit. Our topic, as mentioned for this session, is investing in sustainability, inclusivity, and diversity. Now, there are a lot of critical and unanswered questions that I'm sure our audience here has for our panel, and we're going to try to explore and provide answers to those questions. It's great to have so many friends and audience members tuned in from all around the world. I'll be your moderator for this session. My name is Ali Madhavji. I am the managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund, which invests in and venture builds top-tier startups and consults organizations such as the United Nations. I serve on the board of two public companies in the blockchain space. One is CryptoStar, which is a Toronto Stock Exchange venture company, and the other is Mechanical Technologies, a NASDAQ-listed company. And I serve as a senior blockchain fellow at INSEAD. But more importantly, we have a phenomenal panel here with us today. First off, we have Andrew Tang, who is the managing director at Draper Goren Holm, Matthew Friedel, co-founder at Milwaukee Venture Partners, a female-led angel network, Jesse Draper, the founding partner at Halogen Ventures, Neha Mehta, CEO and founder at FemTech Partners, and Kendra Ragatz, partner at Acrew Capital. But let's jump into it. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Many people think of Bitcoin, and oftentimes they're categorizing mining as wasteful, bad for the environment, and not sustainable. It's not too widely known to the public, and I'm sure the majority of our audience would like to know, can blockchain really be used for good? And what about Bitcoin? So Andrew, let's start off with you. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a very interesting, superficial look at blockchain and the power of mining. If you look at the number of blockchain projects compared to the number of banks in the world, it's an order of magnitude. And if you look at the number of mining rigs, these mining computers, versus the number of mainframes that financial institutions use in the world, another order of magnitude. So really, we're talking about it's a very efficient way to conduct financial services using much fewer number of computers and CPUs. And in fact, if you look at Bitcoin and some of these earlier technologies, since then we have had a lot of proof of stake blockchains now being brought online, and doesn't even require that much mining. So I'm actually thinking, even at the proof of work, it's an improvement from existing financial services infrastructure. And when you take it to proof of stake, that is yet another 2 to 3 orders of magnitude. So it's actually a misunderstood observation.
Thank you, Andy, for that. Kendra, what are some of those misconceptions around blockchain itself and its applications for doing good in the world?
I think importantly, the blockchain has the ability to do quite a bit of good in the world. That is very important for just our broader society. Number one, it provides a lot more transparency in all sorts of industries. And that's good for everyone. It also takes out a lot of costly middlemen, making things, far more accessible to people. And then I would say, at our firm, we do a lot of FinTech, traditional FinTech investing as well. And one of the things that this does is really provides more financial inclusion. So if you look at the numbers of, let's say, Black or Latinx investors in crypto, it's far greater than other traditional asset classes in that it is more accessible. And it's also, there's just far more attractive opportunities for many people who feel that traditional investing opportunities have either excluded or even exploited them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of really positive elements of blockchain.
Fantastic. And Matthew, as a seasoned executive, what are some things that you're looking at from, a Milwaukee, venture partners perspective on where blockchain can help solve global challenges?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the other hats that I wear is I teach at a university. And what I tell my students is that I think the really exciting opportunities coming down the pipe are on blockchain, what I call 3.0. Anything that is heavily regulated, where there's a third party intermediary that can be eliminated or moved to the side, is a candidate. So on the government front, digital identities, healthcare, anything that requires some level of bureaucracy, I think is a candidate for these applications that are going to be coming down the pipe. And what's interesting is that I think people have a misconception, one, about cryptocurrency, but also about what blockchain is in its nature. And if you think about it, try to describe the internet to somebody in the early 90s, right? It's hard to do. But we got these platforms that came down the channel, and then now they're a part of our daily life. I mean, crypto is a part of our daily lives, and soon, blockchain application 3.0, which alleviates some of that bureaucracy, are going to be in the mainstream and just make our lives better.
Absolutely. And Jesse, do corporates or governments, see the sort of potential with blockchain that we're talking about here? What are some of the major hesitations they still have on the technology that you're seeing from, say, your portfolio?
There was actually a really great article in the New York Times a couple of days ago saying how at first the government and the banks were really repelling blockchain and Bitcoin and, all sorts of crypto. And now they're starting to embrace it. I think, especially with the launch of ETFs and then, all of these other, I'm very excited about Flow right now and all of these other types of crypto. Something I would like to say, though, is as a female, and I invest at Halogen Ventures, we invest in women. We have 70 portfolio companies. There has to be a female in the founding team. We don't discriminate. We have 3 male CEOs, I'd like to say. Something I'd like to say is recently, I almost wanted to just sell everything. I wanted to sell all of my Bitcoin and my crypto. And it was because I had retweeted something that someone had been tweeting online that said, hey, let's try and get Bitcoin to 69,420. And I retweeted it thinking, yeah, I want it to go higher too. Like, we're all excited about it. We can kind of make this market go the way we want when we're big, passionate Bitcoin crypto holders. And that is disgusting. What I didn't realize was 69,420 was a whole bunch of men hoping that it would get to 69,000 because it's a sexual position, and 420 because obviously of the pot sort of National Marijuana Day. And I think that is a problem. I'd encourage more women to get into crypto. It's a real opportunity. And I think that the bro culture in crypto really needs to change. And so that's something that I'm frustrated with today. I understand we attach ourselves to these different numbers, but as a female in business and technology who's excited about crypto, all of you men holding this crypto, please don't tie it to sexual positions. That's disgusting. But I think there's so many opportunities, to Kendra's point, it's the democratization of wealth as well. As a VC, I have to fundraise from these fund of funds and endowments that are managed by about 20 advisors. There's like 20 advisors who control the majority of the billions and trillions of dollars of wealth in the world. So that means 20 organizations making those decisions for venture capital. What I'm really excited about is how this will completely diversify wealth in general. Different people will have access to different types of capital and be able to invest in different opportunities that they were never able to do that before, and less of these organizations that control the majority of the wealth will be in control.
I definitely, believe sort of that, the distribution of wealth is going to create a lot more opportunity. I think we're already starting to see that with crypto. I do want to dive deeper in a moment into some of the things that you mentioned, including female-led companies, and we're going to come back to that in a second. I think this is a really important topic. We're actually LPs in Draper Goren Holm, but also another fund called Loyal VC, and we've got 39% female founders and growing. And so it is definitely a focus that we have on some of the things that we do. And I think it's starting to grow, throughout the industry. I think from this first piece, we heard a little bit about, some of the misconceptions around Bitcoin and sustainability, where blockchain can start being used, more responsibly to actually solve global challenges. But I do want to dive deeper into this inclusivity and diversity piece. So in the traditional world, there's a lot of talk about a lack of diversity in the investment world, including underrepresented founders in different categories such as gender, race, religion, sexual preferences. Kendra, I want to start with you. How does Acrew Capital approach inclusivity and diversity in your investment thesis?
Great question. So first of all, we're a very diverse team. So 90% of our investing team is a woman or person of color. So it's sort of just core to who we are. And as a result, we also have different networks, which we would argue has enabled us to generate above average returns. We think of that as being really positive. By the way, we also are multi-generational, which that's a separate subject, but we also believe is really powerful in terms of our investing. So, as a result of these different networks, we certainly have a much higher percentage of diverse founders in our portfolio than average. The other thing that we do is we really bring in our networks in terms of both in advisory and in board roles, and also as people seek to diversify and fill out their executive teams. And as we all know, I think now it's widely accepted that diversity drives better outcomes. So, we've really found a lot of reception from our founding team, some of whom are not diverse, but want to add more diverse members, and they're really grateful to partner with us. And then more recently, we raised our first growth stage fund, where we've primarily been early stage investors. And because we were continuously asked for more diverse representation, we've had a new sort of focus, both back to Jesse's point about democratizing some asset classes. We invited diverse executives to invest in our growth stage fund alongside our institutions. And what that's done is also created an incredible pool of talent and perspective for our portfolio companies. So I think your original question was actually, how do we look at it from our thesis driven approach? We look at our investments as we would with anything. I just think that we ask different questions than the average VC firm, and so we therefore have more diversity in our portfolio.
Well, absolutely. I think you mentioned a few really key points that I want to emphasize here, right? So, I think there's the thesis perspective, but there's all of these building blocks and all of this infrastructure that you're putting around it, right? So that advisory board that you mentioned here, we talked a little bit about it before the call as well. Having diverse experts or diverse advisors that can come in and mentor your founders, potentially serve on their boards, I think also start to create more of that ecosystem of diversity of thought and make it more natural in organizations. Andrew, in Draper Dragon, what are some of the challenges and barriers that we need to solve for further inclusivity and diversity in the investment world, and what are some of the things that Draper Dragon's doing?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I reflect upon even just my engineering school days. You look around, and clearly, it's not a true representation of what the optimal, class looks like, and that, that sort of mix, when you take that to the business world, to the tech world, it has changed very little. So even though, we, from the Draper ecosystem perspective, we always have this goal to try to really diversify our, either our investment team or portfolio company, we do realize there is a more deep-rooted challenge. So we got to go back to the education, and that's why we have Draper University within the Draper ecosystem, we really try to go back earlier in the value chain and see if we can talk to more young people and encourage them to go into entrepreneurship or venture capital or tech. And I'm happy to report we have already, so Draper University has been around since 2012, 3,000 graduates, and we have about 30% women going through the program. I know it's still not up to par, but I tell you that number is much higher than my engineering class, undergrad and graduate school.
No, I mean, I think for the venture world, I mean, I've seen data, 2% of traditional, funds are female led, right, investments. And so, and that number has been growing, but much too slowly. And we need to be doing better. And I think the things that, Draper University is doing, Jesse Draper mentioned with Halogen, I think are phenomenal for the industry. Matthew, at Milwaukee Venture Partners, you guys are very early stage, right? My understanding is you're coming in at sort of the angel
pre-seed or seed rounds,
or seed round. Can you tell us about what you're looking for, from a diversity perspective? How do you guys value this, and what are some of the challenges that you see, maybe downstream as you look at how do your companies then go get funded, after that?
Yeah, so we look at not only the deal and the opportunity, but the first criteria that we look at is the team itself, the founders and their vision. And there's an analogous statement saying sometimes we bet on the jockey. And I think Kendra alluded to it. There's been tons of research that have said the more diverse you have in your team, the more successful you are. So we look for not only diversity in terms of backgrounds and perspectives and things like that, but we also look for passion and genuineness in being able to deliver that, because being a lifetime entrepreneur myself, it's those lowest points can be challenging, but if you have that passion, if you have that integrity, if you have a customer focus, these are the characteristics that we hold very strong in the type of deals that we are looking at. And then just one more point, so again, we're female led. We're an angel network, so we're all individual accredited investors. We're not a fund. So I would love to say that there's a magic bullet that we can have to add more diversity. But what we've done is had a very open book, open group policy. So you can come to our dinner meters where we're evaluating and then see how kind of the sausage is being made and kind of breaking down some of the barriers that are associated with, these type of investments.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into, what you mean by female led as part of that angel network. I understand that there's probably several different layers to look at, right? There's sort of the investor group being sort of diverse. There's, what Kendra was mentioning as well with some of that advisor and infrastructure that can go and support the companies. There's the portfolio companies themselves that could be diverse. And then there's probably even their customers that could be diverse if you're targeting sort of different markets, right? And so, what areas of that are you looking at, Matthew?
Yeah, specifically to Milwaukee Venture Partners, the way that we structure it is we're a nonprofit volunteer-based organization. So our leader, Karen Plunkett, is the managing director, and then she's on the board as well with that. That kind of drives the viewpoint that we look at in terms of our, portfolio company. So it stems from a culture that we're creating inside of our organization to be inclusive, wanting to not only add additional accredited investors to our group, but also what do the founders look like? What are their vision? What is their mentality? What are their morals? That all drives us. So if we see a deal that's really great, but it doesn't align with our values, we will probably pass on that.
No, it makes sense. And Jesse, go ahead. I think I'd be interested to hear, your thoughts on, aspects where, Halogen's getting involved, but even is there things that you're also doing to facilitate or improve diversity and inclusivity within the portfolio companies themselves?
Oh, definitely. When I started this, I was 10 years ago, I was running a technology talk show, and I was only interviewing men in tech. And I made this initiative to interview 50% women in tech because I just didn't see, I just was like, how am I only interviewing men here. We need to, increase the amount of women in technology. And in order to do that, we need media exposure on these women. And I got inundated. I call it like the Batwoman signal. It was like I had sent out this crazy signal for women. And what we've learned now over the years by investing in these incredible women is we're seeing thousands and thousands of deals, and we've made over 50%. Over 50% of our founders are minorities of some sort, and we think of diversity of age, race, and gender in every investment we make, because we know those things will create stronger businesses overall. The data is there, and you want people with different backgrounds and different cultures and different, just different experiences, bringing those things to the table. And we do have one of our male CEOs, who I actually sit on the board of this company. When I invested, I said, hey, I don't see a lot of women here. I think we need more women here. And he has taken that to heart, and they now have over 50% female employees. They're thinking about women at the board level all the way down. Something I'd also say for the venture funds and any kind of fund out there now is the ILPA, which is sort of like the standard fund of funds gigantic 100-page deal memo that you have to fill out if you're taking investment from someone. They have this huge section now on ESG, and it's really, really important that you're looking at ESG from at the board level, at the founder level, at the employee level as well, because they're starting to make sure that things go through the entire organization. Versus just, putting women and diversity on boards. They want to make sure that you are, walking the walk all the way through. And so, but I think that's a really good thing. I think the companies will be stronger overall.
I agree. Like, I think that, helps them be better, faster, stronger. And I want to open it up a little bit and dive a little bit deeper into this topic, right? Because at first we were talking about, a little bit more on the investment thesis, investment process, like that sort of aspect where you're looking at diversity, sustainability, inclusivity. But what about post-investment support? So what sorts of things, and Jesse started to touch on this, but what are some of the sorts of things that, Kendra, Andy, Matthew, you guys are doing with your portfolio companies after you've invested, on some of these topics?
I'm happy to start. I think, and Jesse, by the way, I love what you're doing, and super grateful for everything you are doing. I think there's another element of diversity that I think is becoming more and more important to our founders. And we were actually seeing our founders naturally do this, which is diversity on your cap table. So to go sort of more broadly, I think there are varying figures, but of the $71.3 trillion of assets managed in the US, I think the number is something like 98.3% is managed by a fund owned by white men. So, and I think the ownership percentage is something like 25%. So that number could certainly be sliced and diced in all other ways. I think no one would argue that that number is good for us for the long term. So we were seeing some of our founders go out and create SPVs. So we were seeing our female founders say, we love working with you, Acrew. You guys are diverse. You get our story. You understand the pain point from the female consumer or from a services perspective. You've helped us with our team. We want to make sure all this value that we're creating is really benefiting a broad group of shareholders. We really want to make sure that we're being very inclusive in wealth ownership opportunities. So, that's one thing that we've done with our new Diversified Capital Fund, is just really expanding wealth generating opportunities. And our teams love that. In terms of very specifically with diversity, we've done a number of things. We will do workshops on how to promote and support risk-taking. That's actually something that women tend to have a harder time doing in cultures, as well as underrepresented minorities. Also just, promoting more inclusivity. And, candidly also just, we work really hard in terms of trying to make executive connections and then also customer connections for our companies. So There's a whole, list of things we do. And I know nowadays in venture, everyone works really hard to be a good partner to their companies. But I think having a diverse team, we can bring a really unique sort of value to our portfolio companies, or we'd like to hope we do.
We're seeing a lot of that, Kendra, as well. We just did an SPV with a company that's much later stage than we typically do. And the CEO was sort of like, yeah, we're going to go public. It's going to be great. We're going to make a lot of people a lot of money, and we want to make sure we get in. We have this allocation for specifically women and POC because we want to make them a lot of money. And I'm seeing that more and more, and it's such a cool thing that that's how they're thinking about it.
Yeah. It is great. It's really important.
I guess Andy, Matthew, go ahead.
I was going to share just one of the things we do with our post-investment support. So the Draper ecosystem, we have over 1,000 portfolio companies. So one of the biggest value that we provide in some ways is to kind of not bother the founder, but yet let the portfolio companies get to know each other. And most recently, I observed a very interesting observation. So we invest in Ledger. It's the leading hardware wallet company, and they're based in France. So on their board, they're actually chief diversity officer, and they're governed by the French law. You got to have a certain amount of diversity. So my first reaction as an American was, oh my God, more regulation. I don't like it. But what I learned about from that was the regulation itself may be an overhead, but the concept and the philosophical driver of the regulation is actually really good. So what we did was we took that philosophical approach of recruiting more women and have diversity and have a person on the board who's in charge of diversity, right? It's no different from having an audit, chair and, finance chair. In this case, we have a person who's supposed to look at diversity. What it does, especially for blockchain companies, is that I think to Jesse's point earlier, there is a little bit of bro culture, right? So we got this awesome technology, but very unusable user interface. I mean, who downloads MetaMask to buy NFT? So it's not the mainstream consumer product yet. So that is what we try to sort of bring to our American early stage startups. You don't need a diversity officer. You don't need a board, but that should be a one of the checkbox, and that we would grade the CEO on. And initially, it may seem like burdensome, but you'll realize the wisdom when you hire the right people and they help you improve your user interface, and you get a lot more users. You become a unicorn. Everybody's happy.
100%. Matthew, do you have any thoughts on post-investment support?
Yeah, just as a blanket statement, I think most companies, they're coming to you for funds, right? But I would argue that the more value we bring is through our networks. And we are seeing, some pretty early companies that are struggling on a couple different fronts. So we try and use our networks to help them, whether it's on the sales side, whether it's on the logistics side, whether it's on, whatever it is. So our network is always available to those investment entrepreneurs. And I would argue that's equally as important as the funding, although, that's necessary. But we really want to make those entrepreneurs successful, given all the diverse background that we have in our experiences.
Absolutely. Actually, in our philosophy at Blockchain Founders Fund, we actually believe that the capital is at an early stage is actually a smaller part of the puzzle. And so we actually work with our companies every single week on strategy, product market fit, scaling revenue, scaling users, and then making sure we've got a plan to ensure that the companies are well capitalized. And that's been working incredibly well. And we've been first checks into a number of major companies in the blockchain space. Yeah, I want to move, from here. I think this has been a fascinating discussion, on sort of that investment thesis and how that includes, diversity of, diversity, inclusivity, and sustainability, but even the post-investment support piece. But let's look 5 or 10 years into the future. Jesse, we're gonna start with you. You're gonna have to share with us your crystal ball on the future. How will venture capital look from this perspective? Are we going to have, equality, or what is it going to look like?
Oh gosh. And I'm like, well, we're at the blockchain summit, so I better tie that in, right? I think it's changing. I mean, to Kendra's point, we're seeing a lot more SPVs. Our investors are a lot more excited about SPVs than investing in the next funds. Everyone wants to be an investor. So I think something needs to change and will change. And I actually think blockchain will be an enormous part of that. Blockchain is going to change the future of finance forever. And I look forward to being able to collect LPs investments, in Bitcoin and in differentiated digital currencies. I think it'll be really interesting. So I can't wait.
Fantastic. And Andrew, what are some key factors we need to solve to better ensure equality and inclusivity over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
So I think in a way things are happening, right? I think part of the challenge for diversity or lack of diversity and inclusivity in the past is just lack of awareness. But with information so readily available, stats, they're just kind of in our face, so we understand. And I feel like the Gen Z crowd is going to lead the charge and say, this is not right, we're going to make it right. And I think it's going to just happen naturally. I started investing 20 years ago, and our playbook was, let's go to AT&T Bell Labs and invest in a couple of PhDs, and then give them a little bit of money, and then they created this prototype we sell to Cisco for $1 billion. And then it sort of graduated to, now let's just follow Stanford GSB grads, let's fund them, and then have them create a company and sell it to Google for $1 billion. But now if you look at blockchain projects, I mean, forget Bell Labs or GSB degrees. Some of these capable engineers came from all walks of life, anywhere from the world. They may not, for all we know, they may not even have college graduate degrees, or sometimes they may not even have a real photo. It's an avatar people are investing in, and they are creating awesome products, changing the world. So I think this is happening, and I think our job is to really just embrace it. And when you see these situations that almost looks a little bit different and makes you uncomfortable, you want to ask the question, hey, maybe you want to give this opportunity a chance, even though it looks very different from what you're used to, because the world is changing. For those of us who are in position to pull trigger and to invest in something, you want to be more open-minded and say, this looks different from the other movies I've seen, but I think the narrative is changing.
Yeah, I want to actually dive deeper into that, because I think that's quite interesting. I mean, in terms of Kendra, Jesse, Matthew, geography of investment, as a way of diversity. I mean, in the blockchain space, it's pretty much expanded globally. Teams, some of them are launching products globally on day one, or having teams globally on day one. How do you think about that? How does that reflect in your portfolios from a geography perspective, and how do you foresee that changing?
Hasn't COVID helped improve the way that we work together? I mean, so we are now in an environment where we can work virtually. Somebody can be in Singapore, or somebody can be in the coast, or somebody can be in Europe, and allows us to coordinate much more effectively. I mean, not to say that there's many positives out of the pandemic, but our ability to be able to collaborate and work in a virtual environment, I think it's been improved, and that is helping, some of these companies be, not just centralized in one specific area.
Absolutely. Kendra, Jesse, thoughts?
I would agree with that. I want to just go back to one maybe point on from Andy's comments, which I thought were great as well. So first of all, agreed, things are global. We have founders from all over the world, and we tended to be historically a little more US based. So the pandemic, I definitely think, has made us, we've seen, for better and for worse, mostly for better, that we really are a global economy in many ways. I'm really bullish over the next 10 years. I'm sorry to sort of backtrack for 1 minute on from a diversity and inclusion perspective, because what I see changing in blockchain is a lot of the, maybe let's say the form factor and the consumerization and the comfort. And so now that you can buy a fractional Bitcoin, now that you're going to be able to shop with crypto, I think you're going to see far more women and underrepresented minorities moving to this platform, because you don't have to open up an account from a traditional institution that might be kind of scary. And so I'm really bullish, and I'm very positive in terms of my outlook that this will bring more gender and racial parity. And I think there's even a little more racial parity now into the sort of just the crypto asset class. And then also I'd say the pandemic has gotten all sorts of people very comfortable from an age, gender, race perspective of being online, natively online. And so more comfortable with a lot of those sign up and security issues. So I'm really looking forward to this being a powerful tool to have more inclusivity.
I love that.
Absolutely. I mean, Jesse, do you have some thoughts on geography investment? Are you guys global in sort of your mandate? How do you foresee that changing as well over time?
We do have some founders from all over the world, but we are primarily domestic in the United States. I think it has helped us. We've made quite a few investments virtually. I still, now that things are opening back up, I think we still do want to meet some people. We've seen some potential fraud issues and things, like there's a lot more concerns around, how do you do background checks and extra diligence when you're only living in an online world. So I do think I want to maintain the human connection somehow. We sort of say, okay, new founder, like we just made this rule, like new founder, someone needs to go meet them. And I think that's important. Like we're humans. It's not healthy to be on your computer all day long. And I think you want to maintain some form of interaction, human to human. But we've gotten a lot more done. We're more efficient, less travel costs. Our companies feel the same. It's been pretty incredible that way. But I do think that we need to remember we live in a human world.
No, absolutely. From our side at Blockchain Founders Fund, I mean, we've got companies across 6 continents. We do a lot of these digitally, as I'm sure many of us do now, and we see that actually continue to create opportunities as well in emerging markets, right? And it's been fascinating, to see that sort of develop and grow. I am curious, though, how you're thinking and if your mandate sort of allow, but you've got this whole movement of DAOs that, have started, but, you could see it picking up a lot more over, say, the next 5 to 10 years. You've got topics like privacy, which, are very big. And in the blockchain space, it's been interesting because from our side, we've seen a lot of investments that you don't even know who the team is. It's actually because they're so big on privacy. You get some avatars and you don't do video calls with them. You do audio calls with them. And so
I would not do those deals. I wouldn't do those deals. I would be afraid to do those deals. You need to go meet the avatar. That's not normal.
So are we gonna have like a metaverse you can go into and you can meet the avatar and spend some time with them?
Yes, but I would suggest final step, like meet them in person and make sure it's not like a dog running this company. And I meant like an actual dog. Like, I mean, like you just don't know. Maybe there's some great engineer who's a pet somewhere.
Even in virtual world, relationships still matter. We like to meet the founders. We like to talk with them. We like to understand their background. I'm with you, Jesse. Not to say that we couldn't get to a spot where we can do virtual deals, but relationships matter.
And we do virtual deals. I mean, you think of like even years and years ago with Second Life, people were buying real estate in Second Life. I think that already exists. People are comfortable doing that. But I think for us, when we do a deal, just make sure you can go as far as diligence and, committing, as long as then the final step is just meeting them in person.
What about Kendra, Andy? Are these things that you guys could be doing, like more DAO investments or privacy investments where you might not even have a typical equity structure? You might not know the team. Like what does that look like for you?
I'll start. We also like to look at meet the team. in COVID, we haven't always met them in person, but we've typically had some sort of second relationship where, we can do some very thorough reference checks with folks that we know who would have worked with them. So, trust is still key. And we obviously have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors that we know, who we're investing in. So at least at Acrew, we're not quite there yet in what you're talking about. I don't know about you, Andy.
Yeah, so we're a seed fund, institutional seed fund. And 20 years ago, when our founder Tim Draper realized, hey, in order to do seed business, you got to really have that, that in-person connection, local knowledge. So he created Draper Venture Network. So we are actually part of an alliance of 23 venture capitalists around the world. So for our local seed funds, it gets done locally by the local GP. So the core fund, the US fund, Draper Associates, we would then participate in Series A along with them. So that's kind of how we get around, and I think has worked out great. And I do want to address the Second Life Jesse mentioned. I thought it was fascinating. It's the new world where I think we're seeing the second generation of this Second Life of metaverse. When people are getting real jobs in the metaverse and earning income, I feel like this time is a little bit different. I'm not proposing we all just put on our headsets and call it a day and be part of the matrix, but I do think this next generation of gamers are spending more time in the metaverse because now they actually have a job. It's harder for the parents to say, hey, get off the game and go do something productive. But when in fact the job is in the metaverse. And then if your job is in the metaverse, you may start consuming in the metaverse. And that new economy, it's kind of fascinating. There's no H-1B involved. You work cross-border. So suddenly this is a whole new world.
No, and I want to touch on this, right? So we're actually the first checks into Splinterlands, which is one of the two largest games in the blockchain industry, alongside Acrew. And we're hearing incredible stories, life-changing stories every day in villages and communities. And there was actually a NASDAQ and Motley Fool article that came out a couple of days ago that said someone put in $10 into the game to start, and it's worth $17,000 now in such a short period. And it's incredible to see the entire economy that's being built out of this. I mean, they're doing 1.3 million daily rentals of items. I mean, it's quite incredible to start seeing how this is transforming, communities, making it more effective to be, investing your time into something like this, into a game where there's shared economics versus, being a taxi driver, working at a grocery store, these sorts of things.
During COVID, there were a lot of workers couldn't get work visa to go work in the foreign country, so then they just log on to the blockchain and play to earn model. Right? And I'm a firm believer in intelligence and talent is evenly distributed across all people, but access is not. So I do think blockchain, being a decentralized technology, is one of the best tools to democratize access and really, open up, even the playing field for everybody.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just saying, Andy, that's one of the most interesting things I've heard and to think about. I know that you guys have had trouble for years trying to get people visas so that they could work in the United States. Right. And I mean, this really changes the world in so many more ways than I even thought about.
Yeah.
100%. And I think this also covers that sort of last layer that we talked about, which is actually the portfolio companies' customers and, creating opportunity, diversity, access, as Andy put it, has been incredible. Just given the time, we've got to wrap up. I'm sure we could go a lot more and pick your brains more, but we're going to have to do that another time. This has been a very insightful discussion from our incredible panel. I can personally say I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience will agree as well. I'm encouraged by, the transformation in the venture capital industry, leading to more diversity, as we heard here, inclusivity and sustainability. And it is here to stay and only going to accelerate. And so there's many other incredible presentations and panels from experts all around the world remaining today and tomorrow at the LA Blockchain Summit. What better time to learn from these experts from the comfort of your own home? Be sure to check them out, as I know I will. Thank you again to our incredible panelists for making the time here to share your insights.